In the glass and steel canyons of Silicon Valley, the most brutal wars are not fought with code. They are fought with paper. Kaito Mori, a young, brilliant, but hopelessly idealistic lawyer, understood this better than anyone. He represented the dreamers, the small startups with world-changing ideas. But he was constantly outmatched by one inescapable force: Goliath Legal, the most powerful and ruthless corporate law firm in the world, a machine designed to crush innovation and defend monopolies. For Kaito, every case was a battle of David versus a literal Goliath. His latest case was the embodiment of this struggle. He was defending Aether, a tiny startup that had created a revolutionary battery technology. The tech giant Omnicorp, represented by Goliath Legal, had launched a hostile takeover bid backed by a frivolous but terrifying patent infringement lawsuit. Their strategy was not to win in court, it was to win by attrition. They initiated a discovery flood, legally burying Kaito and his small team under a deliberate, malicious avalanche of 3 million pages of irrelevant documents, emails, and internal memos. It was a tactic designed to bankrupt a small firm before they could even get to a courtroom. Kaito knew they couldn't win this way. He had been secretly working on a side project, an obsession born from his frustration, an AI he called the Linguist. It was not a normal legal AI that searched for keywords. The Linguist was designed to read and understand legal text like a philosopher, to analyze context, to identify logical fallacies, inconsistencies, and most importantly, the ghosts in the machine, the accidental, copied and pasted errors that are the secret fingerprints of rushed, arrogant legal work. While his team slept, Kaito fed the 3 million documents into his secret weapon, his one desperate last-ditch hope. The night before the final pre-trial hearing, a hearing that would almost certainly result in his client's bankruptcy and forced sale, Kaito was on the verge of collapse. The AI had found thousands of minor errors, but nothing decisive. As the sun began to rise, just as he was about to give up, a single, soft chime echoed in the silent room. On the screen, a single line of text appeared, highlighted in a brilliant, glowing gold. The linguist had not found a complex legal argument. It had found a single misplaced word. A word so simple, so mundane, yet so catastrophically out of place that it rendered the entire multi-billion-dollar lawsuit null and void. Kaito stared at the screen, a slow, incredulous, and utterly triumphant smile spreading across his exhausted face. He had found it. The silver bullet. The courtroom was a theater of power. On one side, Goliath Legal's army of 20 elite, pinstriped lawyers, led by their fearsome, legendary senior partner, a man known as the Shark. Their tables were piled high with mountains of files, a physical representation of their overwhelming force. On the other side, Kaito Mori, alone. His table was completely, shockingly empty, save for a single, slim, black tablet. The judge, an impatient, old-school jurist, looked at Kaito with unconcealed annoyance, seeing his empty table as a sign of unpreparedness, of disrespect. The Shark smirked. The slaughter was about to begin. The Shark began his opening statement, a masterful, thundering monologue about intellectual property, patent law, and the theft committed by Kaito's clients. It was a symphony of intimidation, designed to crush the spirit of the opposition before the battle had even begun. Kaito did not take notes. He did not look at his tablet. He simply listened, his eyes closed with the quiet patience of a bomb disposal expert listening to the ticks of a complex device. He let the shark build his entire, magnificent, and completely hollow case. He let him build his own gallows. When it was Kaito's turn, he stood up. The judge sighed, expecting a desperate, rambling defense. "Your Honor," Kaito said, his voice quiet but clear, echoing in the silent room. "I have no opening statement. I have only one question for the court and for the opposing counsel." He picked up his tablet and, with a single tap, sent a file to the courtroom's main display. "I would like the court to direct its attention to page 2,700,482 of the plaintiff's own discovery documents, paragraph 3, line 7. On the massive screen, a single ordinary word was now highlighted in a glowing red box: maritime. The courtroom was silent, confused. The judge stared at the word, then looked at Kaito with fury. "Mr. Mori, is this a joke? What is the meaning of this? This is a patent case about software." Kaito's voice remained calm. "Precisely, Your Honor. The word maritime appears in a clause that is meant to define the scope of the patent. As you know, this clause was copied directly from a landmark Supreme Court ruling." He paused, letting the silence hang. "The problem is, it was copied from a landmark ruling on maritime salvage law. Goliath's legal team, in their haste to bury us in paper, copied the wrong boilerplate. Their entire multi-billion-dollar case, as it is written, legally only applies to ships lost at sea." The sound in the courtroom was not an explosion. It was a quiet, collective, and devastating collapse. The judge, after a long, stunned silence, let out a short, incredulous laugh. He looked at the pale, horrified face of the shark, then back at Kaito. With a single, decisive bang of his gavel, he dismissed the entire multi-billion-dollar lawsuit. The war that was supposed to last for years was over in less than 5 minutes. The shark and his army of lawyers sat frozen, buried under the weight of their own self-inflicted humiliation. The story of the Maritime Clause became an instant legend in the legal world. It was a brutal, hilarious, and terrifying lesson in the dangers of arrogance. Kaito Mori was no longer an idealistic underdog. He was a giant slayer, the man who had defeated the world's most feared law firm with a single word. His small firm was inundated with offers, not just from startups, but from Fortune 500 companies, all wanting to hire the man who had the weapon that could find the fatal flaw in any contract. But the most significant call came from a consortium of the world's top tech investors. They didn't want to hire him as a lawyer. They wanted to invest in his AI. The investors saw the truth. Kaito's real power was not in the courtroom, it was in his AI. With their backing, he transformed Mori and Associates into Lex Machina, a new kind of company. It was not a law firm, it was a technology company that sold truth as a service. They licensed the linguist to law schools, to nonprofits, to small firms, giving them the power to instantly analyze and find the flaws in the convoluted documents of their powerful opponents. He was not just winning cases anymore, he was leveling the entire playing field. Goliath Legal and the entire old guard of the corporate law world were forced to adapt or die. Their old model, built on billable hours and overwhelming the opposition with paper, was now obsolete, a foolishly expensive and risky strategy against an opponent who might have the linguist. They were forced to become more precise, more honest, more careful. Kaito's single brilliant victory had not just won one case. It had forced an entire, corrupt, multi-trillion-dollar industry to become, against its will, slightly more just. Lex Machina became the new standard, but Kaito knew that his technology, in the wrong hands, could become the very thing he fought against, a tool for the powerful to find loopholes, to craft even more convoluted and exploitative contracts. He was now the gatekeeper of a new kind of power, and he faced his greatest moral challenge: how to ensure his weapon would always be a shield for the weak and never a sword for the strong. His solution was as elegant and disruptive as his first victory. He structured his company's contracts with a Robin Hood clause. His corporate clients, the giants of the industry, would pay astronomical fees to license the linguist. But the contract legally obligated them to fund Lex Machina's pro bono division, which provided the exact same technology for free to public defenders, human rights organizations, and impoverished clients fighting against corporate abuse. The more the giants paid to arm themselves, the more they were forced to arm their own opposition. The old guard was trapped. They could not afford to not have his technology, as it would leave them vulnerable. But by licensing it, they were actively funding the very people who would use it against them. Kaito had created a perfect, self-correcting ecosystem of justice. His greatest victory was not in defeating Goliath, but in forcing every Goliath in the world to pay for the slingshots of 1,000 new Davids. Kaito Mori became a new kind of titan, not a titan of wealth, but a titan of balance. He had looked at a system built on complexity and obfuscation, a system designed to favor the powerful, and had found the single elegant variable that could bring it all into equilibrium. He had proven that the most powerful force in the universe is not money, not power, but the simple, beautiful, and undeniable logic of a perfectly structured argument. Years passed. The Mori Doctrine, as it came to be known, had fundamentally reshaped the legal landscape. The era of the discovery flood was over. Contracts became shorter, clearer, more precise. Corporations, now terrified of a hidden maritime clause in their own documents, invested heavily in clarity and ethical simplicity. The legal world, once a murky swamp, had become a clearer stream. Kaito's single act of elegant warfare had forced an entire industry to become more intelligent and therefore more honest. And what of the shark, the legendary lawyer Kaito had humiliated? His career was shattered. He retired in disgrace. But in his retirement, he found a new, unexpected calling. He became the most sought-after professor of legal ethics at the country's top law school. He used the story of his own catastrophic failure, the story of the maritime clause, as his primary teaching tool. Arrogance, he would tell his students, his voice filled with the wisdom of a man who had lost everything, is the single deadliest loophole in any argument. Never forget that. Kaito Mori's legacy was not as a lawyer, but as an architect. He had designed a system where truth had a technological advantage over falsehood. He proved that the most complex problems often have the simplest, most elegant solutions, if one has the clarity to see them. He was the quiet warrior who won a war not by raising an army, but by finding the single, perfect, and fatal word. He taught the world that in the war of information, the winner is not the one with the most data, but the one who understands its structure, its poetry, and its hidden fatal flaws. He was the ghost in the machine who simply and quietly held up a mirror to the machine itself. Kaito Mori never argued another case in court. He didn't have to. His AI, the linguist, became the silent, ever-watchful guardian of the legal world. He dedicated his life and his fortune to expanding its capabilities, teaching it not just law, but philosophy, ethics, and poetry. He was crafting not just a tool, but a new kind of legal mind, one free from human arrogance, greed, and the temptation to take shortcuts. His greatest contribution was the Simplicity Act, a piece of landmark legislation he championed. It did not create new laws. It simply mandated that all public contracts, from a phone service agreement to a mortgage, be written in clear, simple language that a reasonably intelligent person could understand. Any contract deemed intentionally obscure by the linguist was now automatically null and void. He had made clarity a legal requirement, forever shifting the balance of power from the corporation to the consumer. The story of the Maritime Clause became a foundational myth for a new generation of lawyers. It was a story told on the first day of law school, a permanent reminder that the goal of the law is not to obfuscate, but to clarify, and that the most powerful legal mind is not the one who can build the most complex argument, but the one who can find the single, simple, devastating truth. Kaito Mori was the man who defeated an army of lawyers with a single word. But his true legacy was not in the victory. It was in creating a world where that kind of victory was no longer necessary. He was the ghost in the machine who, in the end, simply taught the machine how to be fair.